they're losing. And they're going to lose bigger as this Ponzi scheme gets bloated and bloated and bloated toward the end game because it has nowhere to go but worse.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. It is February 8th, Wednesday, and we have Andy Hoffman from Miles Franklin back on the line for a very important economic and precious metals update. Andy, welcome back.
Oh, thanks for having me. And aren't they all very important these days?
Well, you and I only get together about once every month, which means the entire world has changed in 30 days. There's no shortage of news items to catch up on. You know what? Before I even throw out some of the things on my agenda, what are you seeing as you look at the world?
Well, put it this way. I was just telling you, I usually do my audio blogs Thursday. I did it today on Wednesday because too many things popped up just in the 20 hours between the time that I put out my last article and what has occurred since, starting with a surprise yuan devaluation, probably one of the bigger non-giant, giant devaluations, just kind of a one-day price fixing that was much lower than anyone would have anticipated. And this was occurring as the dollar has lost most of its gains, which shows you, A, how desperate the Chinese are to prevent the collapse of their economy, and B, that perhaps they're retaliating against Donald Trump and his, as I call them, thermonuclear currency and trade war salvos. You have that. You have the massive buildup in oil inventories that's going on, which is making the putting to shame the farce that is the OPEC deal, which is inevitably going to crash. And then you see that at the same time, Saudi Aramco announces that the underwriters for its $100 billion IPO, and that's why they're holding the price up, because without a $50 oil price, they don't do that deal, and Saudi Arabia collapses, and with it, a lot of United States ally help in the Middle East. So you have that going on. You have bond yields, as I predicted. I vehemently predicted in my 2.5% Nuffset article about a month ago. I said that despite all this BS about rates exploding higher, there's no way there's going to be, quote, Trumpflation, and there's no way that rates could survive the 10-year being above 2.5%. Just as I said 3 years ago that rates wouldn't survive above 3%, which turned out to be the top. So now you have the Fed has to meet, Janet Yellen has to speak on Capitol Hill at her Humphrey Hawkins meeting next week, and that's a week after her, extremely dovish statement, FOMC statement. So, it's all falling apart for the powers that be in this Trumpflation meme. And Trump's only in office for what 2 or 3 weeks, and he's made enemies with the entire world, and we're just getting started on a crazy world. I didn't even talk about the Angela Merkel's now losing the race for the polls in Germany. Marine Le Pen is winning the race in France. Geert Wilders is probably going to win in Holland next month. The debt ceiling debacle is going to start in only a few weeks as the debt ceiling suspension that the Democrats put into place to get by the elections comes into ends on March 15th, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I'm looking at.
Well, the other thing we need to look at is FUD, and I really enjoyed your article yesterday, and I picked up on this little meme here: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's FUD, folks, and if we take a look at what Trump has done since he's entered office, we see some good things like ending TPP, ending Obamacare, cutting taxes. He's proposing cutting taxes on businesses to 15%. I think that would be a boon for the economy. On the other hand, we're now facing essentially war with Iran and war with China. Steve Bannon himself has said, and I quote, "We're going to war in the South China Sea, no doubt." I can't imagine more uncertainty and fear being caused geopolitically, but yet domestically, we're seeing good things. Your thoughts on FUD and Trump?
Well, if Bannon actually said that we're definitely going to war in the South China Sea, I mean, that's as bad as Hillary Clinton trying to create war with Russia. Why do we need to go to war in the South China Sea over absolutely no reason? I mean, are we actually trying to create a war with China? Well, it certainly seems that way economically. And again, just like all other political statements and actions, it makes absolutely no sense. There's absolutely no reason. In fact, that was the other thing. I was about to write a whole article about the imminent Chinese devaluation just before they announced this small devaluation last night. Because obviously they, if you read what they are telling us through their newspapers, they consider what Trump is saying acts of war. I don't know why he's doing it. I don't know why he's decided to make enemies of China and Germany and Mexico and everyone out there. But again, it's par for the course. This is what happens at the end of history's largest, most destructive fiat Ponzi scheme. No matter who's in charge, is worse than the last guy. And as for, you have FUD, as I wrote today, you have FUD versus fear dissemination, or as the person I got it from, he calls it fear porn. Fear porn is trying to get you to buy things because the end of the world is coming, and FUD is trying to prevent you from buying things. Like you're saying, oh, China's going to ban or India's going to ban gold, and China's going to stop importing gold, and Harry Dent says gold's going under $500 because of deflation. All that stuff is circulating now. And as for your comments, you said Trump wants to cut taxes. Look, no one tried to help him get elected more than me. I mean, he used the term Brexit times 10 in his speeches because I just basically didn't want Hillary Clinton in. But the second he got in, starting with my Turning on Trump audio blog that next week, I said, there's not a chance he could do any of these things. I mean, how is he going to cut taxes when we have exploding deficits to start with? And he wants to cut taxes to do things that don't produce revenues. Build the military? Are you kidding me? He wants to build, building bridges and roads. That's like, digging holes and filling them up. This doesn't produce anything except more debt. So, and now you have the debt ceiling debacle coming in, and let alone this rise in interest rates. Even though I think it's stopped. It definitely has caused an increase in rates and an increase in debt servicing costs. There's just no way any of this stuff can happen. And again, how much hate has been created in Congress since he's been there? Do you really think? Not you, but does anyone really think any of this stuff is going to get done? Of course not. Probably the only thing that will get done is this ridiculous wall across Mexico, which is all that's going to do is create an enemy. And actually, one thing I will give Harry Dent credit for, he showed the demographics of how there's been a net outflow of people from the United States to Mexico for the past 5 years. So why are we building a wall when the people are leaving the United States to go there? Typical reactionary rhetoric, political going on. And, in Trump's case, as much as I was happy that Hillary Clinton lost, it's terrifying to see this absolute. I mean, he's antagonizing Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's on his own show and hurting his own ratings. So I think 2016 was the wake up call with all the votes, and 2017 is going to be the year where all the actions follow up those votes, and it's going to be scary.
Yeah. All right, let's break down that headline. We're going to go to war with South China Sea, no doubt. Now, that comes from The Guardian, and in fairness, we need to talk about how the mainstream media mockingbirds, like The Guardian, manipulate things that have been said, take sound bites out of context to sell an agenda. And so in this case, apparently that was something Steve Bannon said some 9 months ago, and then he went on to say, we're going to go to war in the South China Sea in 5 to 10 years. There's no doubt about that. They're taking their sandbars and making basically stationary aircraft carriers and putting missiles on those, etc. So again, it's a reactionary headline meant to peddle an agenda. And I think the agenda here is geopolitical conflict and making Trump look bad. Let me ask you this, though, as it does pertain to cutting taxes. Didn't JFK cut taxes and the result was a boon in the economy? I mean, if he were to cut people's taxes, I know if my income taxes were cut down to 15%, I would buy a lot more cool stuff. I might buy a new car. It would just be a boon to the economy, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but when JFK did that, we were on a gold standard, so there was no debt in the country. And on top of that, we also were the world's most powerful nation. I mean, JFK came in right after World War II. The entire world had just destroyed itself and ceded America the reserve currency status. So we had everything back then. Right. So even the slightest recession, we could do whatever we want. And the same goes with Ronald Reagan. I mean, he came into office just when we went off the gold standard and we had barely any debt. So he had the ability to charge up America's credit card by cutting taxes and increasing spending. And for a while, it looked good for a decade or two, except while that decade or two gave us the false prosperity, it also caused the debt to explode. I mean, it's so funny how everyone considers him this big conservative guy. He probably has the world record for spending relative to tax receipts coming in. And it only got worse since as the Ponzi scheme got worse. Where we are right now, we're at 20 trillion in debt. We got another 5 trillion. We got another 5 trillion off balance sheet. And on top of that, we got $200 trillion of unfunded liabilities, and every minuscule increase in interest rates causes the debt service cost to explode. So we can't do any of this stuff now. This is not the 1960s. This isn't even the 2000s. This is 2017 when the whole Ponzi scheme is coming down.
I want to ask you about the economy here domestically because, even for me, I follow this stuff every day and I'm starting to get a little fuzzy on what the reality is. Is the economy getting stronger or are they just continuing to paper over how dismal things are? And I think I want to cite this article for you before we get your reaction. Goldman stunned by collapse in gasoline demand. Quote, this would require a U.S. recession. Apparently, API data is showing the second biggest inventory build in history. So if the economy is so healthy, Andy, why does nobody need gasoline? The opposite is true in a healthy economy.
Right. Well, again, before my audio blog, which actually it was about a variety of things, one of them being the Chinese yuan devaluation, I was going to do a full article just look, anyone listening knows there's literally not a single person in the mainstream or alternative media who has spent more time from minute one talking about the fraud that is this OPEC deal. And I'm not just saying this. I worked in the oil industry for 10 years on Wall Street, and therefore I've got by now 20, 25 years of experience. I know OPEC. OPEC meetings to me used to be as important as Fed meetings are today. I know what OPEC does. And I'm telling you, I've said for years that they have no power anymore. And all that's remaining for OPEC is Saudi Arabia's ties with us and our, as I call it, oil PPT that tries to goose the price up all the time and try to save our only ally in the Middle East. And I said from minute one that all those deals, that deal was a big fraud because most of the countries in it either admitted to cheating or said they would cheat or said that they really haven't decided yet, but they agree with the agreement, but they haven't really put into place any plan to do it. And by the way, you know who's in charge of compliance of that agreement? Venezuela, if that tells you how ridiculous it is. But anyway, since the agreement has happened, there's been no real hard evidence that that there's actually been any cut. There's been exploding inventories. Last week, you had U.S. gasoline inventories surge to their highest level ever. And yesterday, as you're talking about, the APIs, and today is confirmed by the DOEs, showed the second biggest inventory build in the history of the United States. Also, the highest level of production in a year and the highest rig count in more than a year, meaning production is only going to increase. And this came just hours after the International Energy Agency massively increased its global crude oil production estimate for 2018, mostly due to U.S. shale. And why is U.S. shale production going up? Because of this fraudulent agreement that has gotten oil prices just barely over $50 per barrel, which is nothing. It's not a good price. It's killing everybody, but it's just enough to get these shale producers producing en masse, especially with that, as they call it, frack log of all the drilled wells that they did in previous years that they've just been waiting for $50 oil to flood the market with. So again, and then on top of that, you have what you're talking about, that Goldman Sachs, of all people, the biggest cheerleader of all of the entire economy, is talking about how gasoline demand has fallen to a 5-year low. Well, demand is falling, production is exploding. And therefore, as I've said, this agreement is a sham, and oil prices are going to collapse, and most likely Saudi Arabia is not going to be able to do its $100 billion IPO of Saudi Aramco next year, which they announced yesterday, which if they don't do it, that's the end of Saudi Arabia. It's going to collapse. And it's funny because, and then I see this other headline here that says, copper prices surge because big mine is going to go on a shutdown. And going, big mine? The copper production outlook is to keep increasing over current years. How come gold doesn't go up when it's out there? I mean, Standard & Poor's, the number one mainstream media analyst, came out and said what I've been saying all along, last month. I wrote an article about it, that gold production is now forecast to fall somewhere between 20 and 25% in the next 8 to 10 years, with no chance of turning around. How come gold's not going up on that news? Well, of course, for the same reason that oil is not getting crushed today, because they're desperately trying to manipulate the paper prices, and they're going to fail on both fronts because economic Mother Nature is going to have her vengeance everywhere that the powers that be try to keep her back.
All right, well, let's talk gold and silver and Bitcoin if you'd like. Gold and silver, I was going to write an article titled, Don't Look Now, Silver Up 5 Weeks Straight. I mean, silver's been on a healthy tear here. I mean, to the degree, we're talking today, silver's at $17.75, gold at $12.40. What do you make of what you're seeing in silver and gold, and what are you guys seeing there at Miles Franklin in terms of demand?
Okay, and then we'll go into Bitcoin. Now, look, for gold and silver, I mean, first of all, the fact that gold's up, $8 today, and silver's up, I see, 6 cents. I mean, interest rates are plunging. And just as look, Monday, you had interest rates went down, the dollar went down, and gold had a nice day. It was up $15. A manipulated capped $15. It's barely more than the cartel's 1% cap daily cap, and silver was up 25%, 25 cents. But yesterday, you had a big surge, a big plunge in interest rates, and they didn't go anywhere. Today, you have an even bigger plunge in interest rates because this whole meme of Trumpflation and the Fed raising rates is going out the window. And still they're capping, capping, capping. I mean, they're going to be losing because all they're doing is creating more demand at these depressed levels. And still, in the case of silver, you still have this 75-cent or so arbitrage between the East and the West. I mean, the physical market is separating from the paper market, and it will continue to do so. Business was slow, but it's starting to pick up. And Miles Franklin is, a lot of people here in the States have been fearful because the cartel keeps coming in and smashing every rise. But, right now, this whole Trumpflation post-election meme is dying on the vine at the same time that you have the devaluation of the yuan and all these elections coming up in Europe, which are going to be extremely gold and silver bullish. So I think you're seeing a major change in the markets right now. And again, the 200-day moving averages, we're getting pretty darn close. In gold, it's 1266. In silver, it's 1794. I mean, we came within cents of it today. So you can bet the cartel is sitting there shorting the hell out of it right now, desperately trying to prevent silver from going over 18 because it'll bring in more buying. But the fact is, they're losing on all fronts. The same goes for Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin was up to 1070 last night.
1106. It hit 1106 at one point.
Well, it hit 1070 in U.S. exchanges. Maybe in a Chinese exchange, it most likely was over 1100 last night. But you can pick the number; it's the same proportion. And then, just as the yuan gets devalued and Bitcoin spikes to that level, then you see yet again the Chinese government comes in. We need to look at our exchanges more, and the price plunges.
Right.
And here we are back up at 1057. Almost all the gains losses have been recouped, because it's becoming a combination of the boy who cried wolf and eventually the emperor has no clothes. Because you can't stop Bitcoin. You can shut down all the exchanges. It'll just make more demand, just like you can't stop gold and silver by naked shorting the paper markets. It's only going to foster more demand in the physical market until eventually both of these things pop. Because as I wrote back in May of last year, I wrote gold and precious metals and Bitcoin are the twin destroyers of the fiat regime.
Look, I've been talking about Bitcoin now more often. We're going to continue to follow it, and here's why. I think Bitcoin is the canary in the coal mine. We know that silver cannot be at $1,000 an ounce right now, like it probably damn well should be, because of the paper manipulation. They're criminals who can throw essentially trillions of dollars worth of paper at the damn market if they want to, Andy. So we're stuck at 1775 on silver. Bitcoin cannot be manipulated like that. And to me, Bitcoin, look, after that last news item where the Chinese wanted to clamp down on exchanges, Bitcoin plunged down to about 888. I think it even went down to 800 for a minute. It's back at 1052. This thing, I think, has a chance to be at 5,000, 10,000. Who knows? The sky's the limit on Bitcoin because these Wall Street bankers can't manipulate it. It is the canary in the coal mine for all that is bad in the global economy.
Yeah, well, look, there's definitely no one in the precious metals community. I guess Bix Weir and Jeff Burr would qualify. They're not actually in the bullion industry, but they're the only two people in this realm that talk this way. But I've spent more time than anyone in the precious metal industry talking about how these assets are natural allies. And in fact, I wrote why Bitcoin will make gold and silver go up back in December, because I think that gold and silver are the best stores of value in the history of mankind, and they will continue to be for centuries to come, because nothing is going to come around that's going to replace them. Yes, I mean Bitcoin could serve that same function, but it's not like every single storage of value dollar is going to be invested in Bitcoin. But the fact is, from a monetary perspective, the governments fear it so much because it's so easy to use for day-to-day transactions. And that's why I think the governments are going to spend more of their time focusing on trying to stop it, because it's much more of a threat to the actual monetary system. But the problem is that it's decentralized and there's nowhere to attack it. So I think they're going to spend more time focusing on that, and they're going to lose sight of the gold and silver market, which in and of itself they're on the verge of losing, because they can throw trillions of paper at it, but all that does is destroy the supply, which I just talked about, and increase the demand. And as we know, supply is as low as it's ever been. It's only going down, and demand is pretty much as high as it's ever been. It's only going up. And who do you think is buying the most? The governments. Pretty soon the governments will be buying Bitcoin too. So again, we are having, this is a generational war. It's so frustrating to fight because it's the end game against some of the most powerful people in the world. But as we saw when, look, my audio blog today, it was called Nothing is Impossible or something like that. And actually it was in reference, I watched Michael Moore's Who Should We Invade Next documentary yesterday, which kind of inspired me because he's showing how all these things that people said could never happen, like tearing down the Berlin Wall, happen. And they happen much quicker than you think when the will of the people is involved. And I think the will of the people is showing itself in all these elections to start with. And as I said, in the actions you're going to see this year and next year, as the powers that be are overwhelmed because they've caused too much damage.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know what? You inspired me to make a correction here because I think you're very on point as it relates to Bitcoin and, of course, gold and silver. I said that Bitcoin is a canary in the coal mine for the dishealth, essentially, of the global economy, and I really meant the global monetary system. The global monetary system is sick, and anybody who doesn't understand how sick it can get here need only look at what's going on in Venezuela. And if you're in Venezuela right now, I can guarantee you would trade a kidney for some Bitcoin or for some physical gold and silver, right, Andy?
Yeah, and that's a perfect example. This is another reason why, and again, the FUD, right? We talk about. There's no more. It's just so sickening that the people who hate Bitcoin the most are people in the gold community. And from what I've learned now, the people who hate gold most are the people in the Bitcoin community. They don't realize that they are complementary assets, that they are working together. The reason Bitcoin came around is the very same reason that gold and silver have been around for so long, as a storage of value against and a protection against these horrific central banks and governments. And you think about it in Venezuela. You can't buy gold and silver. No citizen in Venezuela will ever have the opportunity to buy physical gold and silver. They probably haven't been able to. I mean, look, Miles Franklin, we ship around the world. We can't ship to almost anywhere in South America because insurance companies will not take the business. It's that bad. And Venezuela is the worst of South America. So again, for anyone who says, well, no one will buy Bitcoin because they can buy gold. No, in Venezuela, there's not a chance you can buy gold if you wanted to. Whereas you can buy, I mean, look, the Venezuelan government is scared of Bitcoin, but the fact is people can get it. And then there are other parts of the world where gold is plentiful or able to be bought, and people will buy as much of it as they can. And one of them, of course, is China, which is the biggest manufacturer or miner and importer. So again, they are working together for different folks for different strokes, and I think we all need to work together as we head to this final end game, because this is brutal. This is, I say a handful of people. It's really not much more than a handful of people in each of these countries that have caused all this damage and are continuing to do it. But they're losing. I mean, that's what all these elections are about. That's what the crashing currencies are all about. That's what the new oil PPT is about. And the 24/7 QE and negative interest rates, which are only going to get worse. It's called they're losing. And they're going to lose bigger as this Ponzi scheme gets bloated and bloated and bloated toward the end game, because it has nowhere to go but worse.
All right, and I'll just leave folks with this. Here's one word that describes how they really are losing. I think if you went back 10 years, Andy, I probably couldn't identify this person by name. The name is Soros. On the world stage now, people know that this man is evil. I think Russia wants to arrest him and try him for his crimes. I know other nations do. I think our nation, Hungary has banned his NGOs. I think this nation needs to step up. I'd love to see Donald Trump arrest George Soros and try him for his crimes. But whether or not that happens, the good news is the puppet masters are being exposed. Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Soros, the puppet of, I think, both of those families. George Soros is truly an evil, sinister man. He should be arrested for his crimes. And I'm glad that his name is now almost as well known as anybody you'd name in Hollywood. George Soros.
Well, I would say that George Soros is persona non grata now. I mean, he lost when Hillary Clinton lost and the Brexit lost, and he's just a nobody now. Yeah. He's got a lot of money, but what can he do? He's like 90 years old, and all his people are getting voted out left and right. Yeah. So, who's going to replace him? Probably Trump himself will have to replace him, because someone evil is going to replace him. But it's, those days, his days have passed. The problem is what comes next, because again, the new world, I mean, Trump didn't win anything. He just temporarily gave a stay of execution from Hillary Clinton. But look at the war that's developing just in this country alone against him, and the wars that America is developing against the rest of the world, which are only going to get much worse as these currencies continue to crash and people continue to blame America for their problems, as in many cases they should.
All right, Andy, tell people how they can protect themselves with gold and silver through you guys.
Yep, Miles Franklin Precious Metals. We are now in our 28th year in business without a single registered complaint. We now have private safety deposit boxes in Toronto and Vancouver, as well as our segregated allocated storage programs in Montreal and Vancouver with Brinks. And you can call us at 800-822-8080. Sorry, 822-8080, or you can email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
All right, you guys can catch Andy's daily blogs over at milesfranklin.com. And of course, we post them at sgtreport.com. Real news 24/7. I hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead, and I really do thank each and every one of you for listening, liking, and sharing this within your own sphere of influence. We love you guys. Hang in there. Bye-bye.
I think this year is going to, as I've said all along, I think it's going to be the year of the truth bomb.